Week 1 of the 2025 NFL season is just about over, and it's time to start looking at the waiver wire for pickups ahead of Week 2. Now, there were a ton of fantasy football implications from what went on in the games during the first week of the season. Some players came out of nowhere and delivered surprisingly amazing performances, while others struggled and really disappointed their fantasy managers. It's important to remember that it's just week 1, teams are adjusting to new schemes, players are adjusting to new situations, and so much is going to change before the end of the fantasy football season. However, adding these 8 players to the end of your bench could pay dividends by the time the season wraps up. Let's go over 8 players you should be adding from the waiver wire after week 1 of the 2025 NFL season. Just note, this is being recorded before the Monday night game between Chicago and Minnesota, so we're not going to have players from that game. First up, we have Daniel Jones, quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. I owe Daniel Jones a huge apology. I had the lowest expectations possible for him going into this game. It was a relatively easy matchup against Miami. They have a very undertooled and banged up secondary. They lost several players like Jalen Ramsey and Javon Holland this offseason, and other guys like Jack Jones have been injured. However, Daniel Jones put on a show, maybe the best game of his career, against Miami on Sunday. He had 272 passing yards and 3 total touchdowns. 2 of them were rushing touchdowns, by the way. And he looked very comfortable in the Colts offense with Shane Steichen at head coach. He made some really impressive throws downfield, and he looked poised and accurate against the weak Miami defense. We know that Daniel Jones can create as a rusher on the ground. If the passing numbers continue to be the way that they were in week 1, he could be a very valuable fantasy asset. Now, it's super important not to overreact to this. It's been 1 week of really good production. He's taking on Denver in week 2, and they have a really formidable defense. So it's going to be a measuring stick game for Daniel Jones and the Indianapolis Colts. We don't really know yet if that week 1 game is a fluke, and we're going to learn a lot in this week 2 game. However, Daniel Jones should be picked up in almost every league after that performance. He's only currently rostered in 5% of ESPN fantasy leagues right now, and adding him to the end of your bench offers basically zero risk, and who knows, maybe you can get a Sam Darnold type season out of Daniel Jones this season in Indianapolis. He certainly has a nice cast of weapons around him. You have Tyler Warren, the rookie tight end, who really had a nice game in his NFL debut. Michael Pittman Jr. is also there, the veteran wide receiver. He battled injuries last season, but really looked nice in the Colts week 1 game. Josh Downs is a really nice weapon out of the slot. He's a great route runner and can make some ridiculous catches on the sideline. And Alec Pierce is one of the league's best deep threats. I like Jones's lack of risk and upside, and worst case scenario, if he falls back down to earth in terms of fantasy value next week, you can just drop him. But like I said before, he's definitely worth adding in all your leagues. I'm not sure what the rest of the 2025 season is going to hold for Daniel Jones. There's a very good chance he won't be able to sustain what he did in the first week. However, I'm not going to lie, as a Colts fan, it's nice to have a good presence at quarterback for a change. And although I do believe Anthony Richardson still has a ton of potential, and I thought he should have been the starter out of the gate, Daniel Jones certainly proved me wrong in week 1, and I'm really glad to see it. Next up, we have Michael Penix Jr., quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. He was selected in the first round of the 2024 NFL Draft to be Atlanta's future franchise quarterback. After Kirk Cousins' struggles in 2024, Penix took over the starting quarterback job late in the season. He definitely showed some promise on tape ending last year, but in week 1 of the 2025 season, matched up against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Michael Penix put up some really nice tape. He made some solid throws and was able to create on the ground with his legs. He had 298 passing yards, 21 rushing yards, and 2 total touchdowns. I think Atlanta should be feeling very confident about what they saw out of Michael Penix. If that field goal would have gone in from Younghoe Koo, the Atlanta Falcons kicker, they would have won that game. Penix drove them down the field within field goal range in almost no time. And with weapons like Drake London, Bijan Robinson, Darnell Mooney, and Kyle Pitts at his disposal, it could be a nice season. By midseason, he could be a relevant week in and week out starting quarterback. He has a relatively small sample size at the professional level to be taken into account. It's not like he started the entire season last year, it was just a few games at the end of the year. But from what we've seen so far in his sophomore season, Michael Penix Jr. is up to the challenge of leading the Falcons to the playoffs. Now, it's week 1, don't overreact, but he did do a nice job. Like Jones, he's at least worth picking up to add to the end of your bench just in case he does go off. Personally, I do think Penix has the chance to be a successful NFL quarterback. They've set him up well. It will be interesting how he performs against a tougher defense, but time will tell if Penix is the franchise quarterback of the Falcons or not. Week 1 was certainly a step in the right direction. It's especially encouraging that at the end of last season, Michael Penix Jr. and Drake London showed a nice chemistry, and Penix continued that by targeting him 15 times in the season opener. Now, London did suffer a shoulder injury, so he is questionable for week 2, but if he's on the field and ready to go, Penix and London should continue building a connection that could turn them into one of the best quarterback wide receiver duos in football. And the best part is, Michael Penix Jr. is only rostered in 20% of ESPN fantasy leagues right now. Next up, we have Aaron Rodgers, new quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. At 41 years old, Aaron Rodgers looked like his old self again. In a shootout win versus the Jets, he put up 244 passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns. He showed really nice chemistry with DK Metcalf, Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, and even Calvin Austin. And after an unsuccessful tenure in New York, I think Rodgers really could end up leading the Pittsburgh Steelers to the playoffs. The AFC is stacked though, so it's going to be a tough job to handle. But if Rodgers puts up more performances like he did in Week 1, that is certainly within reach. He was one of the best quarterbacks in all of fantasy in the season opener. And it's not like the Jets have a bad defense either. They have a good front seven, a good defensive backfield, and Rodgers made some really nice throws to put the Steelers over the top. Like I said before, this offense does have a good amount of weapons. Metcalf was the team's acquisition in the offseason from the Seattle Seahawks. They traded for him to be the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver 1, and he looks like he can be so far. In his first game with Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf put up 4 receptions for 83 yards, a very solid stat line. Like I said before with Michael Penix and Drake London, this could be a solid duo for fantasy. And I really think by the end of the year, we could be looking at Rodgers as one of the best bounce back guys in all of fantasy football. But keyword could, we're going to see how it goes the rest of the season. There's still plenty of weeks of fantasy left, and he may not be fantasy relevant. But what we saw Week 1 was extremely promising for the rest of the year. I mean, I expected Rodgers to be decent, but 4 touchdown passes was not something I thought was going to happen. But I've been pleasantly surprised by the Pittsburgh Steelers offense so far. I just hope to get Caleb Johnson more involved next week. That's besides the point. Aaron Rodgers is a solid pickup in fantasy leagues this week. Just see how he does in Week 2. Hope you guys are enjoying the video so far. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you want more content like this all season. Let's move on to our only running back of the list. That is Trey Benson, running back for the Arizona Cardinals. He was a guy I really liked in the last round of fantasy drafts. I had a feeling they were going to work him in and give him more touches this season. He was a 3rd round pick back in the 2024 NFL draft out of Florida State. He was a really good prospect. He took 8 carries for 69 yards in the Cardinals Week 1 win versus New Orleans. That's 8.6 yards per carry, which is just a ridiculous statistic. He also did take in his lone reception for 6 yards. And honestly, in Week 1, he exceeded my expectations for how much work he was going to get, at least for carries. I mean, James Conner is a very talented running back, but it's obvious they want to get the ball in Benson's hands when they can. Now, this isn't Benson's backfield yet. James Conner, like I said, is extremely talented, but the upside is there for him to carve out a bigger role than he had last year. I think he's already doing that. Now, he's already rostered in a good amount of leagues. He's rostered in 51% of ESPN fantasy leagues, but if he's on the waiver wire, you should pick him up. If James Conner were to unfortunately miss time, Trey Benson would be a really good handcuff. And I've broken this down in a couple videos in the past. The reason I liked Benson this year coming out was because James Conner's contract makes to where the Cardinals can cut him after this season. The amount of dead cap the Cardinals would incur if they release James Conner after the 2025 season decreases dramatically. If they cut him right now, it would be a dead cap hit of about $8 million, but if they did it after the season, it would be about $2 million. That's not me saying Conner's a bad running back, but if Benson flashes this year and shows a lot of talent, it wouldn't be out of the question if they want to save money to cut James Conner and give Trey Benson the reins to the running game. So who knows, maybe they're preparing him for that by giving him more carries this year. That's going to make him fantasy relevant. Anyways, I'm very interested to see how this backfield is split up for the remainder of this season. I mean, James Conner in the offseason even said that he expects Trey Benson to have a way bigger role than he did as a rookie, and we're seeing that happen right now before our eyes. After a solid Week 1 performance in which he saw more volume, I think Trey Benson's worth a pickup in all leagues. Moving on to the wide receivers. We have Quentin Johnston, wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers. Look, I get it. He's had his issue with drops in the past. But after 7 targets against the usually stout Kansas City Chiefs defense, he had 5 catches, 79 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. If he ends up being one of the go-to targets in the red zone for Justin Herbert, who looked like a top 5 quarterback, by the way, in Week 1, he has a chance at being relevant if he continues to get into the end zone. If he truly has fixed his drop issues and ends up being a really viable target in this offense next to Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen, there's nothing stopping him from having a successful fantasy season. Maybe he can finish within the top 30. And he's only rostered in 4% of ESPN leagues right now. You might as well go out and get him if you're in a deeper league. But even if you're not, he's a solid addition on the end of the bench after a really great breakout Week 1 performance. I really do like this wide receiver trio of Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen, and Quentin Johnston. I think they all have much different skill sets. And if Johnston emerges as an early and often red zone target for Justin Herbert and the Los Angeles Chargers, he could be fantasy relevant. And with Justin Herbert at the helm of the offense, I think there could be a ton of yards to go around. They seem to throw the ball a lot in the Week 1 win. And even if they don't continue to do that, Johnston is an intriguing pickup for Week 2. I'm not saying you should start him or anything, but he's at least worth stashing on your bench. Next up, we have Joshua Palmer, new wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills, who I also liked as a late-round target in fantasy drafts this offseason. He signed a 3-year, $29 million contract with Buffalo in the offseason after spending several seasons with the Los Angeles Chargers as a deep threat. And in an instant classic in Week 1 versus the Baltimore Ravens, in which the Buffalo Bills won 41-40, Joshua Palmer caught 5 of 9 targets for 61 yards. That's a pretty solid target share for his first week with the Bills. It's kind of hard to tell if the Bills have a true wide receiver one in this offense. I mean, Keon Coleman had a brilliant Week 1 game. Khalil Shakir was extended this offseason. but Palmer could prove to be a reliable veteran target for this offense. And even if guys like Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, and Dalton Kincaid all get high quality targets, there will be plenty of those to go around for Joshua Palmer to get some as well. I think by the end of the season, he could have a really increased role and get a good amount of targets and yards. And as a deep threat, he could have a tendency for big plays that could really just blow your fantasy weeks wide open. A top 25 wide receiver season could be in the cards for Joshua Palmer this season. And overall, he had a very solid debut for the Bills, coming up big in some clutch situations in his first week. Let's move on to Hollywood Brown, wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, it's pretty obvious why he's on this list. Rashee Rice, the presumed wide receiver 1 for Kansas City, is currently serving a 6-game suspension. The wide receiver 2, Xavier Worthy, had a collision with Travis Kelce just a few plays in to the Friday night game against the Chargers. The collision was obviously incidental, but Worthy hurt his shoulder. It looks like a shoulder dislocation, according to reports. And while his designation is day-to-day, who knows if he plays in week 2. But in his absence, veteran wide receiver Hollywood Brown received a ridiculous 16 targets from Patrick Mahomes. He turned that into 10 receptions for 99 yards. And even if Worthy comes back in week 2, we don't know if he's going to be 100% yet. Hollywood Brown could still get the majority of the targets. And if Worthy does miss time, Hollywood Brown will be the wide receiver 1 until at least week 6. I could see him being heavily involved. I mean, he was the starting wide receiver even before the Worthy injury. And after an early drop in the game versus the Chargers, he really turned up. I trust Andy Reid's offensive scheming to get Hollywood Brown open, and it's never a bad idea to add a wide receiver on the Chiefs to your fantasy squad. Let's move on to our final player. That's Harold Fannin Jr., tight end for the Cleveland Browns. Fannin was selected in the 3rd round of the 2025 NFL Draft by the Cleveland Browns out of Bowling Green University. And in one of the biggest surprises of Week 1, he took 9 targets for 7 receptions and 63 receiving yards against the Cincinnati Bengals. Fannin's skill set is a really unique one. He's not a very big tight end. He struggles with blocking, but where he does excel is route running and yards after catch. He's one of the most productive tight ends in all of college football last season at Bowling Green. We've already seen him tap into a bit of that production ability at the professional level. He started to develop a connection with quarterback Joe Flacco. I liked Fannin as a prospect coming out of Bowling Green. Him getting this much work early on is very promising and makes me really optimistic for his fantasy outlook. And the Browns could run a lot of 2 tight end sets this season with David Njoku and Harold Fannin Jr. I'm super excited to see where the season goes for Fannin. Maybe he ends up as a top 15 tight end. Our honorable mentions are Cedric Tillman, wide receiver for the Browns, Calvin Austin III, wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Quentin Johnston, tight end for the New Orleans Saints. Overall, I hope you guys really enjoyed the video, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more fantasy advice every single week. We'll be making videos like this all season to help you out with your fantasy football teams. I'm Joe, and this is Fantasy Trading Room.